Some men were born to carry a heavier burden than others, like Bryan, who had to spend a lot of time on the ground researching this pie. Tough job.
It's a tough life, I'll be honest with you. It's a lot of eating, it's a lot of meeting people, but I'm okay with it.
All for the love of pie.
I went to Pennsylvania and traveled throughout the state and ate Dutch apple pie everywhere I could, almost too much. And I ended up in Philadelphia with a woman named Holly Riccardi, who at the time owned a little pie shop called Magpie. We spent the morning making Dutch apple pies together, and I'm here to share some of her tips and tricks for the perfect Dutch apple pie.
Great.
We're gonna start out by making the crust. We have 1 1/4 cups of flour in here. We're gonna add 1 1/2 teaspoons of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and we're just gonna process that for a few seconds to combine the ingredients. And to this flour mixture, we're gonna add 8 tablespoons of butter that we've chopped into 1/4-inch pieces, and we've frozen for about 15 minutes.
All right, nice and chilled.
So we'll process this about 10 pulses until the butter pieces are about the size of peas.
Okay.
So this is what we're looking for, pieces about that size.
Okay.
And to that, we're going to add our liquid mixture. So we're going to be using a combination of 4 teaspoons of sour cream and 4 tablespoons of ice water. The reason we use sour cream is because it makes the dough a little bit more tender and flexible and easier to roll out. Just mix that together with a fork. Okay. So we could add our sour cream and water mixture. We're going to pulse this about 12 times until a dough starts to form.
All right.
Okay, Bridget. And that's what we're looking for.
Clumping.
It's starting to clump, not too wet and not too dry. So we're going to turn this out onto a sheet of plastic wrap, and we'll just form it loosely into a 4-inch disc. We'll wrap it up. So we're gonna chill this dough for at least an hour to give that butter a chance to re-solidify, or we can go up to a full 48 hours. Let's get started on the apple pie filling. I have 2½ pounds of Gala apples. You can also use Fuji, Braeburn, Golden Delicious, or Granny Smith if you prefer a tartar apple pie filling. We're gonna begin by cutting these into 1/4-inch thick slices. So to do that, I like to just top and tail the apples. And I like to use this vegetable peeler and just go around and peel these like this. And the reason I top and tail is so my thumb has a little pivot point. And then we're just gonna cut around the core. Okay, and then we're looking for 1/4-inch slices. Okay, so we have our apples sliced, and we can add them right to our bowl. 2½ pounds total.
Gotcha.
So first we're going to add a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So all Dutch apple pies usually contain cream. One day we were in the test kitchen and we were eating a sample of this pie and we were putting ice cream on top of it. And we started looking at the ice cream and looking at the pie and looking at the cream, and we were like, hey, what about just what about just adding melted ice cream to this? You get the heavy cream, you get the richness, you get some more sugar, you get some vanilla.
Right.
Lo and behold, we tried it.
This is ice cream.
This is melted ice cream. It worked.
Huh.
It's kind of a genius idea. So we have a 1/2 cup of melted vanilla ice cream, and we could just toss this around. Okay, so now that this is fully combined, we're going to let this sit at room temperature for at least an hour, but up to 2 hours. And during that time, those apples will soften up nicely.
Okay.
So let's talk about our topping. Dutch apple pie is a single crust pie, and on the top there's a streusel topping. So we have 1 cup of flour here. To that we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm just gonna stir those together to combine. Now we're going to add 6 tablespoons of melted butter, and we're just gonna stir this until there's no dry flour remaining and the mixture starts to form clumps. So this looks perfect. So now we're gonna put it in the refrigerator until we're ready to use it. We're ready to roll out our chilled pie dough. So we wanna flour our board, flour the top of the pie dough, and we're looking for a 12-inch round here. And this is my favorite part of any pie recipe, is getting that perfect 12-inch round. All right, and if it starts to stick under the bottom, I like to just use a bench scraper to push some of the flour underneath. It's important that the pie dough is sufficiently chilled We did let it come to room temperature for about 10 minutes before we started rolling, just so it was a little bit pliable, but you don't want the butter to get too hot and
Right.
start to break out of the dough. So now that we've got about an 8-inch circle there, we could start putting a little bit more pressure on to push it out. Still keeping with a quarter turn, but I'm forcing it a little bit more out from the center. All right, 12 inches that way, 12 inches here. So I have the pie plate right over there.
All right, I bring it to you.
Yes, we're going to roll the pie dough around this rolling pin loosely. We're just going to unroll this over the pie plate. We want to kind of lift the side and tuck into the bottom so we don't stretch the dough. We're just kind of placing it in there nice and soft. All right, so now we've got the pie dough snug in the bottom of the pie plate. We're going to trim any overhang to a 1/2 inch.
Okay.
I like to save all these pieces because when I eventually mess up crimping, I use those for a little bit of patchwork. All right, so we have about a 1/2 inch overhang all the way around. And now we're going to tuck the dough under itself so it meets flush with the edge of the pie plate. And now we're going to crimp. I'm going to just start crimping off to this one side, and I make a very sharp crimp. As this cooks in the oven, these divots and these crimps are going to soften a little bit. So just crimp to where it feels comfortable, and then rotate the pie shell around you.
Absolutely beautiful.
So now that it's all crimped, we're going to cover it with plastic wrap, and we're going to refrigerate it for at least 30 minutes.
Okay.
Our pie dough is chilled, our apples have macerated, and now we're ready to assemble our pie.
Good.
So I've put this chilled pie dough onto a rim baking sheet and lined it with parchment paper. The apples are ready to go in. Rather than dumping them in all together, in which case we might get a big mound in the center, we're going to add them a handful at a time. And as we add them, we want to press them flat to make sure this apple pie will remain even and consistent all the way from the bottom to the top. So with each handful, I'll just give it a light press down. Okay, we'll add our last handful or so of apples. Give the whole thing a nice press. So we have all of our beautiful vanilla ice cream apple nectar here, and we're actually going to add that to the pie.
Good.
Seems counterintuitive to add all the liquid back, but it makes a difference. Now we're about to add our streusel topping, our favorite part.
And that's nice and chilled too.
Right, so the pieces are much more firmed up than they started, and we'll just sprinkle that around evenly. And any big pieces we'll just break up into pea-sized chunks. Okay, and then we're just going to give that a light press down so the streusel topping stays in place. And now we're going to bake this off for about 1 hour and 10 minutes until it becomes nicely browned all over. And a paring knife inserted into the center of the pie meets very little resistance from those apples.
Okay, what temp is the oven at?
It's at 350.
Okay.
Let's take a look at this pie.
Oh,
Looks gorgeous. We're just going to make sure that the apples are tender in the center, and they are. Okay, we could pull this pie out.
okay.
All right, Bridget, unfortunately I have a little bit of bad news. We have to let the pie sit a minimum of 4 hours before we cut into it.
I'd buy that.
Preferably we wait overnight.
Really?
This is something that I learned from Holly, and she insisted on all of her pies resting overnight because as they rest, they're going to settle and they're going to take on a different shape and they're going to be a lot easier to slice.
Okay. It's worth the wait?
Absolutely. It's time to cut into our pie, and you can see that it's settled a bit. It's going to be much easier to slice. All right. Okay.
Masterfully done. Look at that. That would be crumbling all over the place if you cut into it too soon.
Especially with an apple pie, it gives us apple slices a chance to stick to each other. So apple pie, you have to have a little bit of vanilla ice cream. It's the law in
It
Pennsylvania.
is.
Okay, and we're finally ready to dig in here.
Gorgeous. I love anything under a streusel topping. It's crunchy, toasty.
A lot of apple flavor too, right?
It's not too sweet. Sometimes Dutch apple pies just taste like
Right.
apple candy. It's not over the top.
And I love how the apples have a little bit of texture to them, but they're not super mushy, they're not super crunchy.
And this is the bottom crust. Under all those apples, all of that juice, and it's still nice and crisp. It's not flooded, it's not flabby.
And that's because we baked it on the lower middle rack of the oven, and it got a lot of that direct heat, so it helped it cook through nicely.
I'd wait a week if I had to for this pie.
Thank you.
To make this gorgeous pie, it starts with a crust made by pulsing butter, then sour cream and water into a flour mixture. Macerate sliced apples with melted ice cream, and then meanwhile, make a crumb topping. Roll out and fill the pie shell and then scatter the crumb mixture all over the top. Bake the pie and then let it rest, preferably overnight before serving. So from Cook's Country, the not so humble, oh so good Dutch apple pie. Thanks for watching Cook's Country from America's Test Kitchen. So what'd you think?
Leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or just say hi.
Now you can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
Alligator.